Welcome to the Anglotopia podcast, where we explore British history, travel, and culture. This week, we're taking a magical mystery tour to Liverpool as we dive into the world of Beatles tourism and discover what it takes to become the unofficial ambassador to one of Britain's music-mad cities. I'm your host, Jonathan Thomas, and today I'm joined by Charles Rosenay, a producer, actor, author, and entertainingly energetic tour guide who has been bringing Beatles fans to Liverpool since 1983. That's over 4 decades of sharing his passion for the Fab Four with thousands of fellow enthusiasts. Charles is far from your typical tour guide. He's a Renaissance man of pop culture who published 4 books, covered everything from horror movies to the Beatles to ghost stories, and he's the mastermind behind not just the magical mystery tour to Liverpool, but also spine-tingling ghost tours across the UK and vampire-themed adventures to Transylvania. Ooh. With Liverpool's rich musical heritage continuing to draw pilgrims from around the world, there's never been a better time to explore what makes this Merseyside city so special, not just as the birthplace of the Beatles, but as a vibrant cultural destination in its own right. We'll discuss how Charles discovered his calling as the Beatles tour guide, what hidden gems await visitors beyond the obvious Cavern Club stops, how Liverpool has changed over his 4 decades of leading tours, and why the city's connection to the Beatles remains as powerful today as it was in the 1960s. Whether you're planning your first pilgrimage to Liverpool, curious about the business of Beatles tourism, or simply want to hear tales from someone who's made a living sharing British culture with the world, this conversation promises to be both entertaining and enlightening. Welcome, Charles.
Wow, that's a lot there. Thank you, Jonathan. Great to be here.
Thank you. So, let's give everyone some basic background. How did you fall in love with the Beatles, and what sparked your journey from fan to unofficial Beatles Liverpool ambassador?
So I'm a first generation fan. I fell in love with them like millions of other people of a certain age on February 9th, 1964, when they appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. Watched it, fell 100% in love with it, realized there was more to the world than just monster movies and kindergarten and baseball, and just had such an indelible impact on my life that I wanted to be a Beatle. Had no musical talent, couldn't do that. Wanted to go into something. So I literally everything that I've done, whether it's I DJ at parties, the Beatle tours. I used to publish a magazine on the Beatles. Has been really based on my original love of the band in the '60s.
So, according to your website, your first tour was in 1983. Take us back then. What was that very first tour like? How did it come about? And how has Liverpool changed since then?
A lot, a lot, a lot. So the first tour I ever went on was in '83. I was invited by sort of a tour agency to host a trip that they were hoping would work, called Rock Apple Tours. And they said, you have a magazine, Beatles magazine, Good Day Sunshine, a lot of followers, a lot of readers, a lot of friends. Would you like to try to host this? You'll get a free trip out of it. And when I heard free trip, I mean, I jumped all over it. Growing up, I never thought, that we'd be able to visit the land that I, dreamed about my whole life. When I was young, I would clip every article, everything that said John, Paul, George, Ringo. But I would also, if it said, the tall ships are sailing into Liverpool, I would cut that out. If there was a message about the Liverpool soccer teams, I would cut it out. Liverpool was that holy land, the holy grail destination for me. And so when this was offered, I said, sure, but I mean, I don't know who else would want to go like me. Well, the tour filled up like instantly. All I had to do was get word out to a lot of friends and a lot of people who subscribed to my magazine. Uh, it was from there that I took it over. And every year, aside from COVID years, we've done trips to London. Nowadays, we stop in Henley on the way, which is George Harrison's home, and then Liverpool for an entire week, which coincides with Beatle Week. In those days, getting back to your original question, there was no Beatle Week. There were not a lot of sites to go to. We were going to the places. This is where such and such used to be. This may have been, but it may be around the corner, but maybe it's underground or above, one of those you're not 100% sure. I remember distinctly going on Matthew Street, which is the home of the Cavern Club, and it's been rebuilt since, thank goodness. But back then it was just a dingy, scaffolded, gray, like slum backyard area. It was a place that you wouldn't go to unless you had to kind of walk through this side street. It's not a main thoroughfare, and so we went there. And I remember like putting my ears against the walls and just trying to dream what it would be like, some other guy now, hearing the Beatles play through these walls. And that's what the first trip was, a lot of imagination. We went to London, we saw, the Abbey Road crossing, and we passed Royal Albert Hall and did, a lot of the things that were still so viable in London. But in Liverpool it was much, much tougher. And now it's just the opposite. It's completely embraced the entire tourism industry, and there's 3 museums, there's everything is open, and it's just, thank goodness, it's an easier trip to do than it was 40 years ago.
So, since you're clearly a Beatles expert, I'm kind of curious, and this, forgive me, this question isn't on the list, but is
What list?
so what was it about Liverpool that made it such fertile ground for this group of young kids to get together and form a band? Why did they burst onto the scene from Liverpool?
It wasn't just them. I mean, everyone who could play guitar was picking it up. They had heard a guy named Lonnie Donegan who made it pretty popular. But in Liverpool, they were listening to pirate radio and they were hearing the R&B, the soul, the Motown, the stuff that was coming over here, and they were doing their versions of it. I mean, you couldn't do piano, you couldn't do soul singing, so you really got a hold of it. You took Anna, you took songs that were either rockabilly hits maybe or soul hits or R&B hits, and you were playing them the way you could with your makeshift guitar, with your bass, and maybe your one drum kit. So it was a raw sound. What was miraculous is that the stars all aligned in the right place at the right time, and what magic came down from some, who knows, unreal source. Maybe some aliens planted some seeds in this seaport in northern England. But for 4 guys to be that talented, to come from the same area, go to the same schools, walk in the same streets. Just when we go on the tour now, we kind of follow in the footpaths and the footsteps of the Beatles. We go to their homes, but we also go to their schools, the places they grew up, the places they met. And now that it's so well chronicled and there's so many tours that do this, you really can get a great overview of their history and how they just went from being these local guys in this little, grungy town to being the most famous musicians of all time.
Fascinating. So you've brought thousands of Beatles fans to Liverpool over 4 decades. What's the most memorable reaction you've witnessed from someone experiencing the city for the first time?
I'll tell you, it was an older couple. I think they were retired. We get a lot of tears. I would get a lot of people crying because it's like their, dream come true, their bucket list. But we literally got to the Liverpool docks, right where the ocean is, right where the Mersey, it's the Mersey River, and there's all kind of events around there. But now there's huge statues. There weren't statues when she was there, but she got off the coach, set foot in Liverpool, bowed down and kissed the ground. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And her husband, was taking pictures of it. But I said, you guys planned that, huh? You were going to kiss the ground the second. She goes, no, my gosh, that was so spontaneous. I didn't even think I was going to do that. It was just the reaction. And I understand that. When I saw Paul McCartney live, and I hadn't ever seen him live until 89 or 90. And the person who I was with said, why are you crying? And I go, what am I, what? I didn't realize that tears were just falling from my eyes over the joy of seeing him, thinking that that was something I would never, having now I've seen him, dozens of times since, and I've met him a bunch of times, but to have seen him live, I get it. You don't know the reaction, but that's the one that stands in my mind, because she wasn't a kid. She was, she was in her 60s, and first time in England and first time in Liverpool and first time with a Beatles atmosphere. And it didn't even occur to her what was going on. She just sat and kissed the ground. It was beautiful.
Well, I mean, I practically kiss the ground when I arrive in England, but so okay, so walk us through a typical magical mystery tour. What are the must-see Beatles locations that every fan wants to visit when they come on these tours?
Well, I call it that magical history tour,
Oh, okay.
just to do a slight, derivation from the actual title. And I think there's been a bunch of things called that since, but we were the first. Um, for many years, we would do London and Liverpool, and then throw in once in a while an extra city that had something to do with the Beatles' history, whether it was Hamburg, Amsterdam. We did Scotland, we did Manchester, we did a lot of other places, but now it's set in stone. We spend 3 days in London. We go to the Apple building where the Beatles, of course, played on 3 Savile Road, where they performed on the rooftop Get Back session. We go to Abbey Road. Every few years, we get inside Abbey Road and actually do a recording session. For the people who've never been to England, unlike yourself, we do the regular panoramic scenic thing. I mean, I'm thinking that if someone's going to England on my tour, there's a chance they've never been to England before, and they may never go again. So we go to Tower of London, we go to Big Ben, we do Westminster Abbey, we do the Buckingham Palace, we do all the musts, get them out of the way, and then go, let's say, to the first site might be Chiswick Park, where the Beatles recorded their Penny Lane, no, not Penny Lane, Rain and Paperback Writer videos. And we might continue on to different places where, they played in clubs like the Marquee Club, where the Stones also played. It's a combination of every possible site that the Beatles would have had as part of their history in London. And we try to change it up, because you can't fit everything into 3 days. And some people return from, 1 year and maybe 2, 3 years later. So I try to get a good read. How many of the people are coming on this year are returnees? How many are first timers? And if they're first timers, I'm going to hit all the crucial spots. If they're returnees and that tends to skew more of the crowd, I'll try to hit a few more obscure places. One year we did something called the Mad Day Out. It was one of the Beatles' final photo sessions, and they just went hog wild in this portion of London, and there were tons of photos of them in psychedelic outfits and crazy poses. And we never, until about 5 years ago, ever went to this location. So we sneaked that in because there was a lot of people on that particular trip who'd never gone with us before. And then we, as I mentioned, we go to Henley for an afternoon, which is on the way from London to Liverpool. So we stop for lunch. We visit the estate where George Harrison lived, most of his life. He loved Henley. And it also gives the folks a nice balance, because in London and Liverpool, they're seeing huge metropolitan New York, Chicago, Tokyo type cities. In Henley, it's that quaint British village. So they're getting a taste of that, and we'll have lunch there. And then we'll continue on to Liverpool, where we'll have our orientation on the way. I'll talk to people about what we've done on trips, what to expect, security stuff, all that. We check in. And then the first night, it's a walk around. First night in Liverpool, we walk around. I give people kind of orientation of where we're at and where to get to the places. And most of the people, even though we save it for the last night as a party, will sneak their way into the Cavern Club. They want to get that first night of rock and roll. And the Cavern Club, thank goodness, was recreated pretty much to the specifications of the original, except the original had the stage here and the entry here. Now it's the stage is here and the entry is here. It's kind of flipped around, but it captures it. It's got a second huge room where McCartney has played and Adele has played and every rock and roll. So that, and then the rest of the week is it's Beatle week in Liverpool. It's combinations of conventions, festivals, concerts at night, and sightseeing like you wouldn't believe. I mean, most people who go to Liverpool take that cruise, and they have a half a day where they can visit Liverpool off the cruise. Or they go to London and they zip out to Liverpool for a day. And they'll do a 3-hour tour. Maybe they'll get to the Cavern. Maybe they'll get to one of the museums. We go to 3 museums. We go to the Beatles Story. We go to the Liverpool Beatles Museum, which is the 3-floor just extravaganza run by the Pete Best family. And the third one is the Liverpool Museum, which has Beatle exhibits and exhibits of Mersey music. But I got to tell you, Jonathan, if you did a checklist of places, Strawberry Fields, Penny Lane, this club, that club, it's included. One of the tours we do is an all-day tour where we start at 9 in the morning, don't finish till 6 or 7 at night. And by that time, people have noted they couldn't believe how many places we hit. And it's really important to me. I think that, yes, I want to add places and surprise people who are returnees. But if we're you're a one and done and you're only going on this tour once in your life, I want to make sure you get to every possible key place.
So you mentioned the Cavern Club. For those who may not be familiar with it, what is the significance of the Cavern Club and the history
Wow.
there?
The Beatles played there over 300 times. It was their literally their residency. If you say that, the Eagles are playing in in the Sphere in Vegas now, well, they're playing there for a month. The Beatles played there for years. They got their start in a place called the Casbah Club. They played the Jacaranda, and they built their way up to the point where the Cavern was the place. It was a place where the no booze was served. Most of the time, it was afternoon sessions, and it was kids either sneaking out of school or coming right from school. But it's a lifestyle we can't even imagine because it doesn't apply to anything we've ever done in our lives. But that was life. Life was music, and you wanted to be the band that played there. And it wasn't always the Beatles as headliners at the Cavern Club. They were the house band. They were rocking 3 hour sets. Mind you, they'd gone from the Cavern to Hamburg, where they were doing sometimes 6 hour sets a night, playing all night long and having to do song after song. And that's where they got fine tuned. And that's where they really, really got their chops down. And then they came back to Liverpool, direct from Hamburg, the Beatles. And then all of a sudden they're this polished band that has fun with the audience, that's confident, that really rocks. And all the other bands are like, these guys were just these local yokels, and now all of a sudden they're unbelievable. So if they don't know the Cavern, if you can go to one place, it's so tough to say one place because you have to do Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields. But if you do one place that you want to capture the rock and roll and that era and the sweat and the music, it's the Cavern Club for sure.
So, other than the Cavern Club, which
Yeah,
is an obvious spot for a Beatles fan,
yeah.
what are some other hidden Beatle gems in Liverpool that most tourists may miss because they're not on your tour or they don't know about it?
Yeah, the Jacaranda is one that we don't always go to because it's on a side street, and yes, the Beatles painted the walls on it and played there a few times. But just a year or two ago, it got recognized, and I don't know if this is accurate, but it got recognized as the very first place the Beatles played as the Beatles. They were the Silver Beatles, Johnny and the Moondogs. They had all these other titles. Um, I don't know if that's actually accurate, but there's a big plaque there. So now it's a must. We have to go there. But we go to places like Hume Hall, which is the first time Ringo played with them. Pete Best was with the original Beatles drummer, for 2 years. And Ringo took his place. And the first time Ringo ever played, there's our friend Pete Best. A few years back. And the Beatles played with Ringo for the first time. So we go there. There's a place, a woman's barn, which has a stage where the Beatles played with their uniforms for the first time. They were in leathers, they were in T-shirts, they were a typical local band smoking cigarettes on stage. When Brian Epstein took them over, or Brian Epstein, he cleaned them up. He cleaned up their act. He put them in matching suits. No more smoking on stage, that kind of thing. And the first place they ever played, we pass it. It's on this far away on a countryside surrounded by cows. But that's the type of place that someone would never go to on their own. The woman's, I think it's Barnstable is what it's called. And it's pretty cool. It's just that those are the type of things that make me happy, is getting to people that they're going to go to the places, that they've heard of and seen in every book and heard in every song and every postcard. But when we can get them to the more obscure places on the routing, then it makes sense. And I love that part of it.
So, do you visit the childhood homes? Because I know some of them are part owned by the National Trust and English Heritage now.
Right. So two of them are owned by the National Trust, and it's complex because I can't include going inside as part of my tours, so I have to buy actual tickets to go inside for the people who go on the tour, because we go to Harrison's homes, we go to Ringo's homes, but we want to make sure we go to Menlove Avenue and Mendips, and we want to make sure Forthland Road. Those are the places that you can actually go inside. Imagine their original homes, um, made to appear exactly as it would have been in the 60s with the original stoves and the original books on the shelf, the original piano, just as it was when the guys lived there, when Paul and John lived there. Well, that's what you get, but it's a national trust, as you mentioned, so that it's very, very curated and it's managed. You can't just bring tons of groups there. It's 15 max and all that kind of stuff. So that's always tough to maneuver to get, if I have 40 people on a trip, I got to bring in 50 at one time, 15 at another, and then the other 10 at another time. So that's a tougher thing that we can't just include in our tours. We have to buy that, separate, isolate it, and make sure everyone gets in that way.
So there's a lot of mythology and legends around the Beatles. So how do you balance the historical accuracy with all of that and make it what people would expect to hear?
It's funny because we had this. My partner Danny, who's since passed, was the funniest guy because we'd be on a tour and he'd yell to the people, "Guys, no, you got to look at that doorway. John Lennon urinated there once. Don't go." And they were all running and taking pictures. And he said, "I'm just kidding." How do you disseminate? Well, I'll tell you what. I think it's at a point now where there's not a lot of. It's all pretty much true, and it's all pretty much accurate, and it's all pretty much the history. I do a separate tour from this. I do a Dracula tour. And in that one, I have to combine, and hopefully we can do a show on that someday, because I do ghost tours to England too. We combine the myth, the myth of Dracula, of Bram Stoker's novel, the non-history, the fiction is the word I was going for, with Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler, which is history, which is truth. And that's a tough mix, but I mix them both. So you have entertainment and you have history. With the Beatles, you're getting entertainment and history, but in a different way. The entertainment is coming from the tribute bands, from the conventions, from all the things that's planned during Beatle Week that we're then part of. But the history is when we do the touring, because we're doing the sightseeing and the touring with people who are really, really, they're A1. We're talking to David Bedford, who's a Beatles archivist, Beatles historian. When we're in England, we meet up with people who've written books. So, we're not really dealing with the maybe they did this, maybe that. It's mostly the truth. It's funny we say that because I just talked about the Jacaranda where this plaque says it's the first place they ever played as the Beatles. It's questionable because it's never been proven there's 2 or 3 places where we believe that's the case. But that's fine. It's definitely one of them. Other than that, that's not someone making stuff up. That's not fiction. We're not 100% sure. The rest of it, yeah, we're sure. We're taking you to the place where Ringo lived from such and such and such and such. We're taking you to past the hospital, where Paul's kid was born. We're passing the place where, Ringo went to school. We're passing the club, the Casbah Club, where Pete Best's mom brought the Beatles in to rehearse and be the house band. Most of it, I'd say 99.9% is accurate.
So, unfortunately, I've never been to Liverpool. So, as someone who's never been to Liverpool, how would you describe the city's character and what makes it so special beyond the Beatles connection?
So early on when I went there and came back, and I'm from Connecticut, where if you make fun of some of the towns, you make fun of, I don't know, Bridgeport. There's certain towns, and every state has that town that you make fun of. So people came back. You went to Liverpool, really? Why didn't you just stay in London? What was there to do in Liverpool? I heard it's so skanky, and look, it's the people. The people made Liverpool, and when there was that debate. If you're a Beatles fan, the debate was who was the 5th Beatle? Was it Brian Epstein? Was it their manager? Was it Billy Preston who came in and played with them in the latter years? Was it George Martin, their producer? The 5th Beatle was Liverpool. Liverpool is a personality. It's a lifestyle. It's humor. And when the Beatles came out, bands were very stiff, very, rigid. And the Beatles were funny and they had personality. They would not have been the same people coming out of London maybe they would have the same talent, but they wouldn't have had that X factor that I always feel sets them aside. I love bands like the Monkees and the Turtles, bands that always were funny, were great with music, with great catchy songs, but also had personality. But the Beatles, above, I mean, the above and beyond everyone. And the biggest reason was because they came from Liverpool, and that was Liverpool people were the spice of life. I mean, everyone had the story to tell. Everyone in those days when I first went, everyone was, oh, I knew them. They were just local guys. We never thought they'd make it big. But the biggest difference, and I think this is part of your question, and I hope it is what was Liverpool's read on the Beatles? And it bothered them very much when the Beatles left. They leave, but the Liverpool will never leave them, and that was very true. It bothered them for many years, and people would like F them, like, oh, they left us. We don't care less about the Beatles. There was a lot of that negativism early on, and that waned as the old timers either woke up to it or passed or didn't care anymore. But most of them passed away, and there was the new generation who said, "My God, the Beatles are from our home. Why aren't we embracing that?" And eventually, you know what, Jonathan? They did. They embraced it. Tourism exploded. When I was doing the Beatle tours, there weren't these taxis that could take you on full day tours. Now you go in there, and if you want to just jump in a taxi in the middle of March, there's someone, it'll have a Beatles logo on the side, and he knows his stuff because he studied it, and he can take you from morning to night through all these same sites. And I encourage that. If people aren't going on with liverpooltours.com, it's okay. Go there. You're going to have an amazing experience. And try to go to a local fish and chips place. Try to hear if there's any old timers who still have memories of seeing the Beatles at the Cavern, or what they thought of when the Beatles moved away. Oh, God forbid, how dare they have done this? Moved away from Liverpool and moved on to they had to. They outgrew Liverpool. And although they always came back and always did concerts and always wrote songs about Liverpool, and it was always going to be in their blood, sometimes you have to move out of mom's house, and sometimes you have to, leave the college that you've now spent 7 years studying because you don't want to get the degree because you want to keep studying. You eventually have to move out. And I think that's what the Beatles did. And Liverpool was offended by it for a long time, but I think they grew out of it.
Yeah, so that's a good segue into my next question, which was, so you kind of touched on it a little bit, is how has Liverpool's relationship with Beatles related heritage evolved over the years? Are the locals now more proud of it than ever? Are they tired of it? Or are they happy to have all these tourists come visit for Beatles stuff?
Yeah, I'm sure you're going to get some, if you're live in Memphis and it's Elvis week, you're probably going to roll your eyes because your streets are going to be crowded, and, every pub's going to be filled. And it's the same in Liverpool, but they understand the westernization and the commerce of it. It's commercialized so much that, you might have a job working in a museum now, and you might be a guide where you have to know the Beatles stuff. So it's brought so much economy to Liverpool, that everyone kind of sees it from that point of view. But they also, they cherish the Beatles. They didn't for the longest time. And maybe you'll find someone in a pub somewhere who's going to, have one too many, and he's going to say, "Oh, I remember when John Lennon was such a jerk to my mom," and this and that. And I'm sure that's going to happen. And whether it's true or not, it makes for a great story. But yeah, Liverpool's changed, and it embraces it. And it's, such a beautiful city now. It's cleaner, it's safer, and it's, everyone knows the Beatles, and they do, and mostly to a person, love it. And I think that's going to go on for a very, very long time.
So, Beatles things aside, you've obviously spent a lot of time in Liverpool over the years. So, what, other than Beatles related stuff, what are some of your favorite things to see and do in Liverpool?
I guess it's tangential because it not so much anymore, but being a party DJ and being an entertainer, you actually in the beginning said I'd made the tours my living. I really have never done that. It's always been like my side hustle. It's always been a side thing that started out for years. I just wanted to make enough to take a free trip, and I wanted to go back year after year. And so what do I do? I used to go record shopping. I would go crazy. I go to every vinyl shop. Now more so, I'll go to like the whatever their equivalent of Goodwill is. I like going to those used stores just to see if I can find old books, old, Anglo stuff, old British paraphernalia. I like to shop. I like to shop for, trinkets and tchotchkes and novelties. I've never gone to a British football game. I've never seen Liverpool or Manchester. I've never seen a soccer game. Hard to believe. But I'm at a stage now, having gone there probably 70 times altogether, maybe more, where I have so many friends there that so much of it has become a social visit if I'm not with groups. If I'm not with groups, or if I'm with a smaller group, or if I can break away. Um, what would I recommend to people who are going to Liverpool and they're not just Beatles centric? There's one of those giant what do they call it? Ferris wheels like they have in every town, the big eye, you can see the whole thing. You should take a ferry across the Mersey, which is music and Beatle connected, but it's still a great thing to do. Take in a soccer game, take in a cricket game, and just explore the culture, because you'll be surrounded by Beatles without even wanting to. But it's amazing what there is beside the Beatles, and they're proud of that too. I just being a person who, if I'm going to a new city, whether it's in Detroit or Cleveland, if it's a place I've never been, I'm crazy. I'll go to that, used record store still. I'll go to a theater. I love seeing beautiful, magnificent theaters. Liverpool has not just beautiful theaters, beautiful venues, beautiful concert halls. It has the Philharmonic pub, which is across from the Liverpool Philharmonic, which is one of the most ornate pubs you'll ever visit in your life. And I think the bathroom doors are gold, if I'm not mistaken. So there's some hidden treasures that every Liverpool book will tell you about.
So, what's the best time of year to visit Liverpool? Are there any specific Beatles related events or festivals visitors should plan around?
Yes, sir. The best time to go on, oh, I just thought it was going to stick to my head. Will it stick? No. The best time to go is when I do the Magical History Tour. Why? Because it includes Beatle Week. Beatle Week is the last 2 weeks in August, and it's during bank holiday. As we have Memorial Day and Labor Day and all that, they have bank holiday. And bank holiday in that part of August, so many people will go to the shores. So many people will go to place where there's beach and sand if they can. And it's when so many people have vacations because the weather is the nicest. You always think of England being gray and rainy, and it is most of the time, but during August, July, you get lucky for a few weeks and there's no rain. During Beetle Week, it makes the most sense because, aside from me bringing people there, and you'll see me, there's Beatles convention. The big Beatles convention takes place during Beatle Week. All the festivals around town take place during that time. And because there's 100,000 or whatever Beatle fans in the city, there's probably 100 Beatle groups that come from Japan and Canada and the US and every other nation that has, Beatle fans who come to Liverpool to play. So you're literally walking street to street to street, hearing nonstop Beatle music. And yeah, is it like that all year round? Well, yes, at the Cavern Club it is. At the Beatles shops it is. In the museum it is. But here, it's every block emanates. You just pour out Beatles music. And that could be a plus or a minus. If you're a Beatles fan, oh, this is it. You're in heaven. No different. I keep bringing up, I don't keep bringing up, but whenever I do interviews, Elvis Week in Memphis, it's very Elvis centric during that week. It's the same thing here during Beatle Week. It's the best time to go. If you can't go during then because you know what, you're starting school or you're a teacher, or that's when you have your other vacations, fine, go anytime. Just spend more than that one day in Liverpool, because you can't get everything in. You need at least 3 days. When I tell people we do 3 days in London and a whole week in Liverpool, they go, a week in Liverpool? What? How could you fill that? I go, how can I fill it? I could spend 2 weeks in Liverpool and not go to every possible site. But for us, that's the perfect time. And people just, Jonathan, I want to add, when you do, if if you're a restaurateur or a foodie, your best restaurant will have an off day where you walk out and soup was cold, or the waiter, wasn't as nice as you. Even the best five-star posh restaurant will have its off day. I am so proud, blessed, lucky. I don't know what the word is. 100% satisfaction from the people who go on the tour. And I think it's a combination of like-minded people. They're going to the place they dream of. It's and my personality as their tour guide, making sure they're having fun. It's all the right elements put together. And people come back and we stay friends. We exchange Christmas cards. And it's like, hey, Charles, I'm going to go back in 5 years. I'm going to go back in 2 years. I had the greatest time. So I forgot what your question was, but I think I went on a little tangent there.
No, you answered the question. So it's a good segue into my next one, which is in 40 years of leading these tours, what's been the most surreal or unexpected moment you've experienced on these trips?
The unexpected moments are the ones, obviously, that were unplanned. One year, this is the one that stands out. We're ready to leave London. We're on the coach, and a girl is like trying to get my attention from the back of the bus, waving a newspaper. What's going on? She goes, Julian Lennon, John Lennon's son, is doing a signing at a toy store in London in 2 hours. I go, what are you talking about? She brings it up. Hamley's Toys, central London, right near the West End where all the theaters are. Apparently, there was the launch of an ecological game where the profits from the game benefited a charity, an ecological charity. And Julian Lennon, to support the charity, was signing copies of the game. And this was in the day when, back then everyone wasn't, everyone does book signings now. Everyone does autograph signings. Every celebrity's available. Julian Lennon did not do this often. And I said, you know what? We're changing our schedule. We can be in Liverpool 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 hours. We could go in the middle of the night. We're all going to this event. The bus driver approved it. We did a few minutes of sightseeing and then got to that place an hour before everyone. The 30 of us 40 of us, 50 of us were in line for him. 8 other people came besides us. It was so ill publicized, but that was fine for us because we took pictures with him. We got his autograph, we got his game. Some people happened by miracle to have CDs of his that they had signed. And it's stuff like that. People say, can we have an exact itinerary? Well, I'll give you the planned itinerary. But on every page, it says subject to change or enhancement. Because there have been so many trips where we, took that impulsive move. Another one was it's so funny because Julian, I just mentioned him, and it just so happened that he was a guest on a talk show in England. It was the equivalent of David Letterman's show. And somehow they found out there was a Beatles fan group en route in England. How can they get us in their studio? They did. We said, no problem. You let us know where it is and we'll make our way there. And we were 1/4 or whatever of the entire audience got to see him. Never planned, Jonathan. That was never in my itinerary. I didn't have a schedule that we would see Julian Lennon in a TV show in a studio. But we always have the flexibility of that. And we jump at that opportunity. There's been times where we were in Liverpool and a famous act was playing at the arena. And I took a poll and who wants to go? We could do this or we can do that. We can see Oasis or whoever it was in concert. And Bill, Charles, can you get tickets? Yeah, I can get tickets. You want me to do this? Yes or no? We took a vote on the coach and change the itinerary. So that's happened on many occasions. More often, it's the celebrity that we didn't expect. There's certain celebrities now who are there every year. John Lennon's sister Julia, still alive, still healthy, still wonderful with fans. She's an ambassador at the Cavern Club, so we see her every year. But there's people like the author Mark Lewisham, who's considered, the Beatles authority. Other members of the groups, Badfinger or Peter and whatever, Beatle associates who are sometimes not scheduled to be at the convention and show up. We try to make sure our group gets to see them and get their autograph and get pictures with them. So there's a lot of that kind of spontaneity. But I wish I could plan the spontaneity. That would be amazing. I guess that doesn't really exist in the world.
So, other than Julian Lennon, have you met any of the surviving Beatles or any other family members?
Well, I have. I've met Paul McCartney on a number of occasions. There's a picture of him and myself on the back of my book, my Beatle book. And I've met George Harrison at the airport once, and that was incredibly serendipitous. Ringo at press conferences I've spoken to, Paul at press conferences, never John Lennon. But literally every person you can just, if you did a rapid, well, did you meet this? Did you meet this? Did you meet this? If they were relatives of the Beatles or connected somehow, I met them not just because I've done these tours and we've come in contact with them, but I used to also produce conventions in the States and I would bring them over as guests. So, yeah.
So, how has leading Beatle tours changed as a business over the last 40 years now that we have the internet age? And
Mm. When I used to send out information, it was handwriting a postcard and telling people the tour was on. And is it easier now to press a button and send a mass email? Yes, but there's other people who do. You know, I was the pioneer and I was the go-to, but everyone, who researches my tour can just read the itinerary and do it themselves. Everyone can go book a flight and follow in the footsteps of the Beatles themselves. The only thing I can offer now that's different in this day and age, in this digital age, is and this is an ego talk. It's my personality, it's my energy, it's my guarantee that people have a great time and that they're with like-minded people, and that we've been doing it so long and have it down to a science that there's not going to be any glitches. The bus isn't going to break down on the way. Even if it does, we have it replaced within minutes. It's just such a smooth sailing ship, and the people who go, it's a trust factor. So, how has things changed from then to now? I mean, a lot. Everything is open. You can get inside Strawberry Field. You can get inside the orphanage and inside the museum, and there's beautiful grounds. And there's a lot of places that are open that weren't open years ago. But for me, as a tour operator, as a host, it's changed in that you do something long enough, people know who you are, and they want to go with you for a trust factor. But anyone can go on their own. It's as simple as that, and they can go any time of the year. I only do it, this time in August every year, the same time.
so, tell us about your book of top 10 Beatles list. What's in it? What's it about? And why
The
should
book of
our listeners buy it?
Yes, they should buy it. Go right to Amazon. Look at my last name, Rosenay, and you'll see all the books that I have for sale. It was really a unique thing. It came out of COVID because I wasn't doing tours, I wasn't DJing, I wasn't booking bands. All the things that I do, I couldn't do. So I wrote a few books, and the book of top 10 Beatle list came about because a lot of people were home just like I was, not touring and not doing stuff. So I got in touch with actors, rock stars, DJs, authors, people in the Beatles world, people who connected with the Beatles. And I said, can you give me your top 10 Beatle list? And they said, well, what do you want? My favorite songs? I go, okay. Or your favorite albums, or your favorite memories, or your favorite places to Liverpool to go, or I get, or your. And I really opened it up so that people could choose what they wanted. But it's like Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong, Mackenzie Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas, Pete Best from the Beatles. It's literally a who's who of celebrities, 64 of them, giving me their top 10 lists. I wrote their bios. I included some amazing photos, put it out, and it's not just for Beatle fans. If you love top 10 lists, you'll love the book. If you love celebrities, you'll love the book. If you love the Beatles, well, then you've got, all the right ingredients in the stir for a fun read. And it's available on Amazon or from the website www.bookoftop10, the number 10, not TEN, bookoftop10beatleslists.com.
And we'll put the link in the show notes for everyone.
Thank you.
So, for my final question, after 4 decades of Beatles tourism, what still excites you most about sharing Liverpool and the Beatles with new generations of fans?
There's the book. I found it. I thank you. Thank you for asking that because, I always wondered when a rock band goes out and plays their same song night after night after night, how do they not tire of it? And people will say to me, "You've been taking people to Liverpool now for, over 40 years. Aren't you bored of it?" And I'm not, Jonathan, because it's the joy that the other people have. And it's, if I was playing my hit, it would be looking out of the crowd and the people singing along, and they would be loving it, maybe hearing it live for the first time. And that would probably what, propels the bands and the artists to love to play their hits over and over. To visit Liverpool with a new group of people who are seeing it I see it through their eyes. I'm loving it through them. And when they get excited, the other thing would you take a picture of me crossing Abbey Road? I know it. I had that feeling, I had that same experience in 83 and 84 and 85 and year after year after year. And every so often I got to get my picture taken with that silly walk across Abbey Road that everyone does. That's what it is. It's the joy of the people going and me, loving it vicariously and in actuality through their eyes and emotions.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on the Anglotopia podcast, Charles. For those inspired by today's conversation and ready to embark on their own Beatles pilgrimage to Liverpool, you can learn more about Charles's magical history tour and his other adventures by visiting liverpooltours.com. Link will be in the show notes. If you're intrigued by his other passions, check out his books and other at the links in the show notes. And we will also have all the links for all of Charles's stuff because he sent me a lot of links. So they'll all be there for everyone to look at. If you enjoy Charles's stories from across 4 decades of Beatles tourism and his infectious enthusiasm for sharing British culture with the world, please subscribe and like or comment on this podcast. If you enjoyed the Anglotopia podcast, please consider joining the Friends of Anglotopia Club, where you can get early access to new episodes and connect with other enthusiasts about Britain. Join us next time as we continue exploring the people, places, and stories that makes Britain's cultural heritage so endlessly fascinating to discover. Thank you, Charles.
Really, man. Thank you so much.